Welcome to another segment of Interviews That Matter. I'm your host Raj Mehta. Friends, in this segment, we bring those guests who influence our lives. This includes elected officials, policymakers, heads of major organizations, and other dignitaries. It is my sincere hope that the knowledge brought in by this guest will help our community. November 6th is an election day. Most of the time, we remember presidents, senators, assembly people who are running for election on November 6th because we see them all the time, we hear about them, but then we many times ignore the judges. But judges are also a very important part of this year's election. Today, we are going to talk to Supreme Court Justice Leonard Austin. Justice Austin has been hearing the cases mostly on matrimonial and commercial litigations. He has been appointed in 2009 on the appellate court as a justice. Let's meet Justice Austin. Judge, welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Very much. Judge, first, we would like to know you more, that who you are and what is your background. So if you kindly tell us, what is your background?
Well, professionally, I'm a graduate of Georgetown University.
Okay.
For my undergraduate, I majored in government, minored in sociology and theology, and then I went on to law school, Hofstra University School of Law, class of 1977 graduate, admitted in 1978. I had a small practice here on Long Island, individually and with some others, during the course of the following years. And I was elected to the Supreme Court in 1998, and I've been serving for almost 14 years now. Personally, I'm married 30 years, or just about. I've got two wonderful children, delightful little granddaughter, the love of my life.
Wow.
And it's wonderful. You don't appreciate grandchildren until you've have one. It's really super. Politically, I've been involved since I was actually before I was 18. I was involved in community school board elections and the like in my hometown. I grew up in Farmingdale, and I've been active politically, obviously, until I was elected to the Supreme Court. I ran 9 times, and I was elected on my 9th try. So there's a big poster in my chambers with an eagle, a bald eagle, and under it says tenacity.
Wow, wow! 9 times you ran it.
9 times. So this is my 10th and last run.
10th and last run. But Supreme Court term is what, for 14 years?
14 years.
Right. Yeah. So 14 years, it's a long time.
From a political perspective, it is and it isn't. The good news is you're out of politics. You're really able to do that which you are elected to do. The problem is you come back 14 years later when your term is up and you go to the political leaders and you say, here I am, and they say, who the heck are you? Because you've been out of it for so long. So it's kind of a good news, bad news from that perspective, but it's a wonderful job, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Very good, very good. So what are the normal cases that you have I know that you are in commercial division and you also handle matrimonial cases.
Well, when I first got elected, I sat in Suffolk County for my first year, and in Central Islip, and I did matrimonial cases. It's really the only thing I did. And matrimonial involves divorce, child custody, equitable distribution, anything that's related to the marital relationship and before the divorce actually is final, and then subsequent post-matrimonial judgment. Then I came to Nassau. I did another year or part of a year in matrimonial. In October of that year, I was assigned full-time to the commercial division in Nassau County, so that would be in 2000. But I started really the beginning of 2000 in doing commercial and matrimonial.
So you started together, like from 2000 onwards you were doing both?
2000 I was doing both, and then by the end of 2000 I was only doing commercial.
Okay, so matrimonial you did only 2 years?
Only 2 years,
right?
Although I did that for 20 plus years in private practice.
Right.
Private practice, I did mostly matrimonial and complex commercial cases, and a little bit of everything else.
Any famous matrimonial case?
In which I was involved?
Yeah.
I was very blessed. Many of my decisions were published, so I have many of them that have been out there. I would say the one that really perhaps had the most impact dealt with a child who was abducted by a father from the custodial parent mother, and he took the child to a country that was not a signatory to the Hague Convention, which requires countries to cooperate when such a thing happens. So the child ended up staying in the foreign country, and it was really a very difficult situation. I found it very frustrating. The other one that comes to mind is a case where a mother taught the child to say that the father was sexually molesting her, and I was through 3 weeks of testimony, I was able to figure out that the father wasn't, but rather the mother was having the child make it up. And I changed custody and refused to allow the mother to see the child except in the presence of a psychiatrist.
Wow. So ultimately, like you probably must have figured out from the child himself or herself, right?
Well, what happened was the mother thought she was very, very smart.
Okay.
What she did was she tape recorded the child making the accusation, and it was the same exact words each and every time.
Wow.
So ultimately, I was able to discern that the mother was saying the same phrase to get the child to say it. So when I have the child before me in what they call an in-camera interview, that's in the judge's chambers, the parents are not there to influence the child, just the child's lawyer. They asked, I used that same phrase that mom had used that I heard on the tape recording, and the child said the same exact thing while she was coloring. So I knew that she was programmed to do that. So it was very disturbing, very, very disturbing.
Yeah. And the other case, you could never get the child back from the other country.
No.
So what happens? I mean,
Mom ended up moving to the foreign country so she could have a relationship with the child.
Wow. Oh, that's sad.
Yes. It was horrible. And in fact, part of my decision, I suggested that perhaps Congress needs to address certain rules with regard to passports and Border Patrol to make sure that errant parents who are stealing the children are not permitted to do that.
So mostly it's about mostly the matrimonial cases are about child custody, right? I mean, that's the most important thing. Then money comes later. Right?
To my mind, it is. Yeah, I think the children are first. In fact, I was asked to write an article for the matrimonial bar, and I told the story when I first got elected. My new law secretary said to me, well, what's your judicial philosophy? And having run so many times, I said, my only philosophy that I knew of was to get elected. Right. So I thought about it. But my first day on the job, I did a few conferences, and all involving custody, and I realized my judicial philosophy was very simple: children first. After that, it's simple. When equitable distribution law first came into effect, there were appellate decisions dealing with it, and a very wise judge from Queens County, Judge O'Connor, wrote that dealing with a dissolution of a marital relationship from the equitable distribution perspective is really no different than dissolving a business.
Right.
So there it's business,
I mean, it's
but with the children, it's the children, and that really is so very important.
Now, see, the divorce rate has gone up a lot, obviously.
It's terrible.
It's terrible, and that probably filled the court up, I guess.
There's never a want for work in the matrimonial parts. The old joke is the leading cause of divorce is marriage. But the real bottom line is that I think we're in a very different society today than we were even in our parents' day. In our parents' day, if something broke, they'd fix it.
Right.
And now, if it breaks, throw it away. And we're pretty much in a throw-away society, and I think marriage has fallen, unfortunately, into that category.
So tolerance level has gone down,
the willingness to work at things, to make them continue to work, is just not there.
Different mentality, different thinking.
Which is one of the reasons why I, having been married almost 30 years now, I'm blessed with a spouse who is willing to work at it, and until I say yes, dear. But it's but seriously, two people who care about each other should be able to work it out and not just throw it away at the first sign of difficulty.
I think we are all programmed to say yes, dear, right?
Well, that was the first words I learned after I do.
Actually, I'm also married for 30 years, so we are all same 30 years and with a wonderful wife.
Well, sadly, we're becoming the minority.
Yes, yes, yeah, I agree. I agree. Now, obviously, you have handled a lot of commercial cases.
Absolutely.
And commercial cases involved obviously contracts and contract negotiations, and obviously one party thinks this way, another party wants money, another said, I don't want to give you. So what was the, what is the complexity that you see it? I mean, to me, okay, when if I sue somebody or somebody sues me, either I'm not paying or they're not paying me. Is that the bottom line?
Well, that's certainly one aspect of it. We see many different kinds of cases in the commercial division. For example, you have family disputes, and in many cases, the dynamic that you have in a commercial case is no different than you have in a matrimonial. Because if you think about it, you spend more waking time with your business associates than you do with your spouse. So if there's a sense of disappointment or betrayal, you're going to much more feel that intensely in the context of a business than you even are in the context of a matrimonial. So there's also an emotional level to it. But it's not just breach of contract. You have employees who go to other employers. Are they stealing trade secrets? That's something that we see a great deal in the commercial division, trying to keep things at an even keel in that regard. Making sure that as partners come and go, that they're able to keep things going. One of the real nice things about the Nassau commercial division, with which I was involved for almost 10 years, really a little bit more, is that the real benefit of being in a commercial division that gets it, and Nassau has been blessed with judges who really have gotten it. I'm fortunate to have been a part of that team, but really wonderful judges, so that cases that would barely be able to come to Nassau based on the venue, 15 people were involved in a lawsuit breaking up a law firm in Manhattan. One of them lived in Nassau. They brought the case to Nassau.
Wow, okay.
So that was really kind of a real benchmark as to the quality of the commercial litigation that people were seeing in the Nassau judiciary.
Judge, we'll take a short break and we'll be right back.
Great.
Welcome back to the Interviews That Matter. We are having a conversation with Justice Austin. Justice Austin, welcome.
Thank you.
Now we are talking about the commercial litigations and commercial disputes cases, right? Now I'm in a technology business, obviously, So normally, when we get drafted by a lawyer drafts everything in the contract. That includes non-compete clause, that you cannot compete for a period of a year.
Right.
How, and many times, I don't know whether it's really enforceable by the court, and still attorneys put it in there. So what is the purpose?
To scare the employee, generally, to scare off potential employers of that employee is also something. But really, the question of enforceability is whether or not the services of the employee are unique. New York has a public policy that says we're not going to deprive a person of the opportunity to work.
Right.
And therefore, if they are going off to work someplace else, so long as they don't take trade secrets, so long as they don't take confidential customer lists, or do anything that would be grossly prejudicial to the employer by their leaving, we're not going to stop them. But where you have a situation where you've got the major producer for a company going to the competitor, where you've got customer lists, trade secrets, which are very clearly defined in the law, we're going to let them go. And so, but you can write it in a way that does protect the employer, and there are many little tricks of the road that allow it. One of the things lawyers really should do, and many transactional lawyers, those who draft the contracts, don't do, unfortunately, they don't really sit down and show it to a trial lawyer. Can you defend this? What are the loopholes? how would you beat this so that they can write it in a better way? And that unfortunately doesn't, I don't think, happens nearly enough.
They take just a boilerplate contracts normally, right? I mean, you know, that's how it normally happens.
I'm not going to speak for all, but unfortunately,
but normally that's what I'm saying.
Sometimes see that too often.
Too often, right?
Again, there's no same set of circumstances for each. They've got to be, you know, made unique and fit the circumstances that you've got.
So
it's not a one-size-fits-all.
Right, exactly. So then mostly, you know, this type of cases, like which are really, if it is a millions of dollars involved in there, that's when really comes to the court.
Right.
Smaller cases, I mean, there is no way to prove actually.
Well,
or it's not easy to prove. Let's put it this way.
The quantum of proof that you need is no different if you've got a $10 case or a $10 million case.
Right.
It's really the same. The rules of evidence are the same. The rules of law are the same. And we don't say, well, this case is more important because it's 10 million, and that case is not so important, it's 100,000. We look at it as every case is important, not from the perspective of the amount of money, but to the people who are appearing before us.
Right.
And that's really the key. That to these people, this is the most important case. And we have to deal with it that way. That's
no, from your perspective, I agree. Yes, from your perspective, but from the, you know, business people's perspective, I mean, it's not.
In the commercial division, one of the things we do to assure that each case is dealt that way is they get day, you know, at least the way I had done it was they had day certain trials. As a business person, certainty is the important thing.
Right.
And if you know that on December 15th you are going to have a trial starting, then you know at that point you better start getting serious. You better get your ducks in a row. You better have your lawyer ready to go because that's the day you're going to go to trial. And everybody was treated the same way.
So I guess that's how you use the technology, you know, in your courts.
Well, technology is a little different. The big area where technology has become so very important is, I see you're sitting with a paper and a pen.
Right.
That is not the usual anymore. We have our iPads, we have our notebooks, we have our computers. We have PDAs and all the other electronic technology that we use to communicate with each other. All of that traps data and information. And all of that in the nature of discovery has to be available. So one of the things that we in the court system, and I have to be aware of, is that in the old days, if there was a case involving documents, those documents, the old proverbial way of putting it was they were all in boxes in a warehouse in Newark, in New Jersey. But you would go to that warehouse, you would go in, and you would have to go paper by paper to find it. Well, now, a perfect example is the case I had with AIG. AIG produced 400 some odd thousand pages of documents on 3 disks.
Wow.
So now, instead of having to go to the warehouse, which was never fun having done it, I will tell you, now slide the disk into your computer and you have to go find it. But then you have other problems. Is it in native format? Is it TIFF? Is it hashed, which means paginated? Is there a way of going through it so that you can find the documents and search it? Searchability is very important. The lawyer who demanded the papers from AIG was very upset that he got these disks, but now he can't search them.
Wow, yeah, that's right.
And I said, did you get them in the format that you asked? He said, yes. I said, be careful what you wish for. and you know, so that sort of thing. The cost of electronic discovery is horrible, and it forces parties and lawyers to really focus in on what's important. You know, when you want paper, it's very easy to say, give me everything. Now, if you ask for it, the cost could be hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's where your $10 case versus your $10 million case becomes more significant. Not to the court, but to the parties.
To the parties, right.
So you could spend $300,000 to find the smoking gun in your adversary's case for $100,000 that you're suing for. So the economy of litigation changes a great deal as a result of the technology.
In 2009, you've been appointed in the appellate court.
That's correct.
So what is the difference? I mean, you are still considered a Supreme Court justice, right?
That's correct.
So
Our court system, the highest court in New York is the Court of Appeals.
Okay.
The next highest court is the Appellate Division, and the full title is Appellate Division of the Supreme Court of the State of New York.
Okay.
And then you have the Supreme Court. And judges who are in the Appellate Division hear appeals from all of the different trial courts. In New York, including the appellate courts, we have 14 different courts. And they have appellate courts above them because everybody is entitled to a right to appeal if they feel aggrieved in any way with regard to the result that they got. So they broke the state up in the late 1800s into 4 appellate departments, which in that time were equal population departments. So the first department was the Manhattan and the Bronx. The second department was all of Long Island, Nassau, Suffolk, Queens, Brooklyn, Staten Island, and 5 counties north, Westchester, Orange, Dutchess, Rockland, and Putnam. So those 10 counties make up the second department. We now are almost half of the population of the state of New York in just
Nassau and Suffolk.
No, in the second department.
Okay.
And in the second department, we hear more than 40% of all of the appeals that go to the appellate division from the various courts. We are the busiest appellate court in the country.
Wow.
Each of our judges handles approximately 1,000 appeals a year. So we are terribly busy. Each of us reads, I would have to guess, more than 1,000 pages a week.
Wow.
And in answer to a question I had just last week, what a strain that is on my eyes, I will tell you I'm in the appellate division 3.5 years. I am on my 3rd new prescription since then.
Wow, interesting, very interesting.
I wouldn't trade it for anything.
So now if you, let's say you're running for re-election in November 6th,
right.
And if you, we wish you lots of luck, obviously.
Thank you so much.
And if you are successful, you'll still be in appellate court?
I will still be in the appellate court.
Okay.
I am an additional judge, and it's funny, 3.5 years, I'm already moved up to about halfway up the ladder in seniority.
Wow,
so,
congratulations.
People retire and go on to other things, either because they're required to by age or other opportunities present. So I love the challenge of the appellate court. The difference in part is, as a colleague of mine once said, on the trial court, we can handle a case and affect 2 people.
Right.
In the appellate division, we handle a case and we affect history.
Right.
It's applicable really to everybody in the state. So the cases that we handle really mean something. And so they're heavier, they're much more difficult, but they're fun. My colleagues are just wonderful, wonderful people. Not that I agree with them all the time, but in the disagreements and the going back and forth, we are truly able to reach a consensus and do what the law requires us to do. So from that perspective, it's just fabulous.
So mostly you don't have to, worry about witnesses and all that. All you do is get the papers, you read it, apply the law, and then give your judgment.
We also hear oral argument from the attorneys.
Or you do again?
Oh, absolutely. Attorneys will come in and point to us and say why the trial court was right or wrong, and point to us in a particular section of the papers what was there and why. So some lawyers opt to argue, some lawyers opt not to, but we have to be prepared on every single case to make a decision and determine whether we agree or disagree with what the trial court did.
So if you decide and you give a decision, then they can still go to appeals court?
Absolutely.
And appeals court is the Supreme Court?
Is the Court of Appeals.
Court of Appeals, right. It's a Supreme Court.
Well, it's like the United States Supreme Court.
Right.
So that's the difference. Now, the United States Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals are similar from the perspective that you can't just say, I don't like what the appellate division did, or in the federal situation, what the Circuit Court of Appeals did, come hear my case. You can only go to those courts by permission. And the Court of Appeals in New York grants permission to very, very few cases. So while the 4 appellate divisions of New York, the 4 departments of the appellate division hear approximately 15,000 appeals a year, the Court of Appeals takes about 150 to 200.
Wow.
So the bottom line is, and what really makes being in the appellate division such an awesome responsibility, is that really 99 out of 100 times, roughly, we are the last word.
Right.
So that makes it very interesting and very challenging. We work so hard to get it right for that very reason.
And you still get commercial cases?
We get commercial cases.
For you?
Any kind of case you could imagine, we get them. From cases against New York State, dealing with Medicaid rates, to we've had some terrible criminal cases. I was involved in the hygiene case, the case of the guy who drove the wrong way on Meadowbrook Parkway.
Oh yeah, that's
drove into the limousine.
Right.
I wrote the decision affirming that conviction. So I've been involved in that. I just wrote a decision dealing with the rights of adoptive children, and so it's as varied as you could imagine. And it's interesting.
So now you don't get just commercial cases. You get any cases,
everything,
whatever. Everything.
We hear 20 cases a week.
20 cases a week. Wow.
And from every kind you can imagine.
What is the skills that is required for you now? I mean, and I know reading. Okay, you read a lot. Okay, that's one thing. What else you require? I mean, we talked about it a little bit earlier. Yeah. That negotiating skill is the key, right?
Well, negotiating skills are different. On the trial court, when you're trying to settle a case, you're negotiating with a plaintiff's attorney and a defendant's attorney, and therefore you are negotiating back and forth, explaining to them the strengths of their case, the weaknesses of their case, and having them understand that a middle ground is the best way to go. Well, I don't have contact with the attorneys other than when they come into the courtroom and argue the case. So that's out. The only thing that I can do now is as I prepare a case, I can look at it and say, the trial judge was wrong for this reason.
Okay.
Or was right for that reason, and be prepared to discuss that and negotiate with my colleagues who are as smart, if not smarter than I am, to get them to see my perspective. And that to me is really the key, is if you can get your colleagues to agree with your perspective of a case, you will have succeeded. Okay. And I will tell you, there are sometimes I've moved to the other side when I've been convinced. It's being willing to have an open mind. It's being willing to prepare the case and research it, know what it's about. And it's really a willingness, a patience to be able to get there. Because it's as you said, it's really hard work to get there. So to do it really makes a difference. I will tell you that I'm in the court 3.5 years, and we are famous for our collegiality. We take great pride in it. We disagree agreeably. Nobody is, we work on the case. I disagree with you. We hug and we move on to the next case. We don't get hung up on disagreement. You can't. It's impossible to accomplish what we accomplish every year if you do that. I have written close to 20 dissents in cases. I've only published now 5. The 5th one came out today. 5. The other 15 were cases where I got my colleagues to agree with my position based upon what I wrote. So that to me is the measure of success.
It's a majority, right?
It's a majority.
Majority that decides.
Right.
The cases.
And if I'm not in the majority, I'm fine with it. I try and convince them in my discussion with them, and if not, in my writing. And if I don't succeed, I make a decision that that's worthy of an alternate statement as to what I think is right, and you move on.
So you write basically everything.
Right.
Right.
Everything is published decisions.
Okay. Now you also have written articles about certain, famous laws. I know.
I sure have.
Can you tell us something about it?
Sure. In addition to that article about my judicial philosophy, having done matrimonial work for so many years, I wrote several articles on valuation of licenses and how we go about doing that. Back, it's got to be more than about 20 years ago, our Court of Appeals handed down a decision called O'Brien versus O'Brien, which talked about the value of a medical license being an asset in the marriage that could be distributed. So I wrote a series of articles in the American Medical Association's journal discussing what that means to the holder of the license, some suggestions on how to protect it, how it can't, and other ways that it just can't be protected, and recognizing that that is really where the law is. And New York is rather unique in that area of law. We don't have community property, as does California and most of the states out west. We have what's called equitable distribution, so that even if a spouse is entitled to an amount of the license, the value of the license, it may not be 50%. The court will measure the degree of contribution and other equitable factors and determine whether or not.
So, you know, if it is a housewife and a husband is a doctor,
right?
I mean, what do you do?
Well, it depends. How long is the marriage? Did the wife go out and work 3 jobs so that the husband could go through medical school?
Okay.
Did the wife raise the 4 children?
Okay.
Did the wife entertain people in the hospital who could help the husband get ahead? That sort of thing. So we recognize in the law that there is the contribution of the license itself, but there's also the contribution to enable the license to grow in value by virtue of services.
Right.
So a wife in that capacity, 15, 20 years of marriage, is likely to get close to 50%, whereas a 5-year marriage, not so likely. You know, maybe only get 10%, maybe get nothing.
Okay.
You know, every case is really very unique to itself, based upon the relationship of the parties and what each of them did.
Now, you will be on the ballots all over Nassau and Suffolk County.
I will.
November 6th, right? So, tell us your message to the viewers of the show. Because mostly viewers are from Southeast Asia, you know, so India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, some Caribbean islands and all that. So,
sure.
you can tell us.
Well, we have a really wonderful system. Everybody has the right to vote. If you're a citizen, come out and vote. Now, the problem that we've got is the judges are kind of the invisible people on the ballot. Nobody really knows judges, and that's really a terrible thing. On a bunch of levels, it's a good thing on others. We make our decisions as best we can so that we come up with a fair result. And I know not everybody agrees with every single decision, but we really do the very best we can. But the bottom line is that we have a presidential year. We have the President of the United States, Governor Romney, President Obama are head-to-head. That's what has most of our attention. That's really where things are. We have Senator Gillibrand running against Wendy Long. That's another race that attracts much attention. Congress, State Senate, State Assembly. Those are races that people get into because those people vote on their taxes. Those people deal with things that are really kind of bread and butter to the people. So judges kind of fall by the wayside. However, it's so very important that you can vote for president. I'm not telling you who to vote for. You can vote for senator. I'm not telling you who to vote for. But don't ignore the judges, because we are, as the third branch of government, as very important to interpreting the law and enforcing the law that the executive and the legislative branches do. Who does that and who makes sure that the laws are interpreted properly is the judiciary. So judges do make a difference, and especially those who have the votes have to recognize that it's not only a sacred obligation, to my mind, to be able to enjoy that freedom for a president, for a senator, for a legislator, but also for judges. Because that's really where it is. And from the top of the ballot to the bottom of the ballot, that's really what the difference is. I believe in my 14 years on the bench, I've made a difference. I published roughly 2 decisions a week when I was in the matrimonial and commercial division. That's over 1,000 decisions that have been published during my term on the trial court. In the appellate division, I've written over a dozen opinions, some dissents, and I've behind the scenes made a difference, I believe, in many, many more cases. I'm very proud of my record. The commercial division has rules of operation, not just in New York, but statewide, because I wrote them. So I made a difference in that regard as well. As when we were kids, I'm sure you remember, there was a saying that said, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem.
Right.
I believe I've been part of the solution and made a difference for the courts, and I'm very proud of that record.
Well, thank you very much, Judge. Really appreciate it.
I really appreciate the opportunity.
No problem. Thank you for joining us. If you have any comments, suggestions, you can email me at rajmitv@gmail.com. That's again rajmitv@gmail.com. And please do not forget to watch the interviews on YouTube at our Infosys International channel. Thank you so much. Until next time, we'll see you. Thank you.